Good afternoon out there in YouTube land, wherever you are. This is Midnight's Edge After Dark's Goddesses of Gore. With me, as always, is 1428 Elm Street's Miss Susan Layton. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. I hope you're doing well too, Tom. Hey, Mecca, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am doing fine. I hear you're a busy lady. You had a big move.
Yeah, just getting packed. Hopefully, I'm not super echoey for everybody. I apologize if I am. My office is empty, so.
Oh, man.
Echo.
Yeah, Tom, we have a special guest tonight, one of my writers, Lori Kitka. She is our American Horror Story guru and also an indie film champion. Hey, Lori, nice to have you here.
Hi. Thank you, everybody, for having me on. I'm super excited.
We are not too terrifying yet, are we?
No, absolutely not.
But we have a lot of stuff to talk about, or at least up front anyway. I don't know much about the that's going to be a lot of you guys. But this first thing I have a lot of opinions about. We had some breaking news earlier today. Isn't that right, Susan? Why don't you tell us a little bit about that? You found this news first, of course, on Susan's website where she's the editor, and that is 1428. And I'll give everybody a little shot of that quick while you tell us a little bit about the story.
Sure. Well, one of our writers happened to be on Facebook, and this picture is no longer around. So, we were lucky some people saved it, so it's not available. But the new good guy design leaked for the upcoming Chucky film. It's the new design, the new prop. You get to see the box. And it pretty much tells a story of what we were all suspecting. That's the doll itself, but here is the packaging. So we can see that it's Buddy with a Wi-Fi symbol. And down there, if you look, there is Buddy or a picture of the doll. And looking at the doll there, I think it was Luke that said it looks like Bobby Hill.
Yeah,
definitely.
It does.
With
God
hair.
damn it, Bobby. Why are you being a killer doll again?
So this is what we know. I mean, inferring from that picture, it was already inferred from an article that we did and that everybody did that the doll may not be called Chucky. And it's looking like that may be the case. They took this down. So evidently, there's been some conflicting reports about it. People were arguing in our comments section about it. One person said, well, the current director is calling the doll Chucky. And somebody else came in, and I don't know if they're affiliated with anybody, that said, no, they've changed a lot with the script. They've done a lot of different things. That's not necessarily true. So that's supposedly, for right now, what it looks like. But after this leaked, it may not look like that.
There is that plausibility. We also come up with the idea that MGM may have took it down because it's a leak, or the person who leaked it out may have asked for it to be taken down because it looked like it was a selfie. That's why we have that shoddy block there. We don't want to dox the guy.
Yeah.
Or girl.
Or girl. Yeah. Thank you. This does correspond with everything we've been hearing, does correspond with everything I've suspected, that MGM only owns the rights to the original script and not Chucky himself or the sequels, which put into my mind the question of whether or not they were even going to be able to use the name Chucky, because the original script had his name being Buddy. And I brought this all up before, and you can go, I think, one of the earlier podcasts, like last week or the week before, where I explained it all. It's where Blood Buddies started and all that kind of stuff. To me, I think this is legit. And besides looking like Bobby Hill, I must say it looks like one of those cheap knockoffs from like China or Mexico of what Chucky would look like if they did a doll.
Well, we know that the story that they said for this particular incarnation is it's made in China.
Right. Yeah. And that's the whole thing, is the voodoo part's completely out. The story that I had told you guys about was completely out, about where Andy shares his blood with the doll and his id goes into the doll. This is actually basically an AI gone wrong, is the story we're hearing. So it makes sense.
Yeah.
So I wonder if Hasbro's going to like be upset because they still own the rights to the My Buddy doll. And then
I wonder if it's been out of production long enough that the copyright may have lapsed.
I doubt it. I feel like
sorry, I can't talk today.
I feel like it's not been long enough for that to be true, personally. But
the fact that if it hasn't been in production long enough, and if they change the name and all that, I don't know. Maybe they're figuring that. And Hasbro, I don't know, because they don't manufacture it anymore, do they?
No, I mean, in Play School, I think also it was Hasbro Play School. I think. Now I'm looking at. I saw earlier it said Hasbro. Now I'm seeing Play School. No, you can buy them on
Hasbro bought
eBay.
a bunch of companies up.
Yeah,
that's another thing.
Yeah, I mean, they're a vintage toy. They don't still make them, but I was always under the assumption that they changed it to Chucky so that Hasbro and Play School wouldn't be upset and have it so associated.
Yes.
Yeah.
Back then, that was the deal, and that's where I was saying in all the scripts up until production, it was Buddy, and then all of a sudden, My Buddy doll came out right in the midst of it all, and they're like, "Oh fuck." So, so then they changed it, and then they also brought in the fact that he was a killer. That's where Charles Lee Ray came in. The name Chucky all kind of came together. So I don't even know if any of the scripts his name was actually Chucky until the shooting script, to be honest with you.
I mean, I don't know how I feel about this remake just in general, honestly. Because I think that I would enjoy just a continuation of the universe that they have already. Because
which we're getting on anyway.
Yeah.
Which is another reason why they probably can't use Chucky.
Yeah.
There might even be a stipulation in there that, MGM can make a remake at any time they want, but as long as Universal's still in production of the other Chucky series, they can't use the name probably. And they have to make it look so at least X amount different, or as in our famous Star Trek arguments, 25% different. Mecca will get that joke, but yeah.
I know Don Mancini's not thrilled about this at all. And we talked about that the last time when we revealed the picture, the face of Chucky. I don't understand why MGM is doing this. And to that point, this idea of we're doing remakes, reboots because we can, shit has got to stop. No, we don't have to do this because we can. This was a successful franchise. We just had a movie last year that did rather well. We don't need to reinvent this doll. We don't need to do that when we've got a television show in the works. This is pointless. A very pointless execution of, the fact that, like a mountain, we came, we saw, we did it because it was there. And that's no basis for doing a movie.
Right. And I think you even mentioned Sony had something to do with it too, which wouldn't surprise me, because I know Fox and Sony were like kind of sharing MGM for a while there, as far as like how they were dealing with their distribution and everything like that. I don't know the logistics of it, but yeah, they've been just MGM's been remaking every major film they have under their belts. That's why we got Death Wish, and what was the other one? I can't remember now, but they just did another one, or they announced another one. I can't remember which now. My mind draws a blank, but it's just like you guys just said, we already have the series. It's still ongoing. The reason it went straight to video is because the fan base had kind of dwindled anyway.
Yeah.
So I mean, what do you expect to get out of this other than just another thing to package and another reboot, whatever. It makes sense.
That's why I was saying that, like, because have you guys seen Puppet Master Littlest Reich?
I have it, and yes, I have.
Okay. So I think that, and even the last Chucky movie, was it Seed of Chucky? Was that the last one?
Oh no, my dear. You actually had Curse and Cult of Chucky since that straight to video. Yes, yeah.
Don't judge me for that. But the thing is, like, it's turned into this whole, like, it's taken another direction into like a kind of fun, campy thing, which I personally enjoy. But maybe like what they're trying to do with this remake is to make it like more of a genuinely quote unquote scary thing again. But I just think it's misguided, and I don't know how they can make it good. I mean, I hope that maybe they can, but I don't know how, you know.
Well, it's all about money. It's not because they want to make it scarier or anything like that, or they want to reinvent Chucky for like any artistic reasons, because Curse of Chucky already was kind of back to the darker roots of Chucky, and Cult of Chucky was kind of a mix between the two. And now they've got this series coming out, which is going to be an extension off of that. And a perfect point to you not seeing the last two is, like I said, it had a dwindling fan base. Don't get me wrong, I love Chucky, but I know it's not as big a fan base to begin with as the bigger guys like Jason and Freddy and so on. But he's also not as low level as, like, say, not Leatherface, but Leprechaun, and maybe even Pinhead to a point. He's in that middle ground there. So they're still continuing that on, but this is just MGM deciding we're going to redo this, because I pointed out in my review of Cult of Chucky that this is the only series now, until Halloween just came out, that was still in the original continuity, still since back in '87, which has something to say for all these horror franchises, because none of them can really say that. The only one that kind of tried it other than Halloween was Leatherface with Texas Chainsaw 3D, and that was kind of a semi-quasi sequel reboot thing.
Well, I mean, Hellraiser has had like God knows how many sequels. I think 11 maybe.
It feels like
not that many, but quite close.
Something like that. I mean, it's something crazy. So, I mean, I don't know. It's just
at least 8 or 9, yeah.
Yeah. The fact of the matter is, there's plenty of people who have ideas that could be making original horror movies. But yeah, it's like you said, it's a question of money always. Because it'll make money in the foreign markets too.
Right. Well, and Annabelle has a lot to blame. Oh, sorry, Susan.
That's what they're basing everything on now. Is they used to, because they all have always cared about foreign markets, but now even more so. They're, case in point, and this is the wrong genre, but looking at what J.J. Abrams, what's going on with him. We have to have the world and theme parks now because China. It's this gradual progression, and I know it's a business, and we keep on saying this. Yeah, ROI, all that stuff, but still, there. To your point, Lori, there's people out there that have original ideas, but the studios don't want to back them because they're scared. They can't afford to back anybody new because they're untested or what have you. It's definitely not a good thing to be an independent filmmaker right now at this point in time. Unfortunately, it's harder than it's ever been. It's easier to get it distributed, but harder to do what you need to do with it, like what Harrison Smith was talking about last week. And that's a shame.
What do you guys think would have to happen for like another sort of like boom in independent film, kind of like in the 90s with, I mean, this isn't in the horror genre specifically, but like when Quentin Tarantino and all those people came out with movies and like these great movies were getting released.
You'll never have that again.
Yeah, Hollywood would have to like completely collapse in on itself, and like the major studios would have to go bankrupt. Probably.
There's something similar to that might happen, but there's this renaissance in film like every 30 years.
Of course, yeah.
And right now, the difference you have between then and now is everybody can make a movie. YouTube is an outlet. Back then, it was like just a hassle just to get your movie seen by anybody. Just to hear the story of what Kevin Smith went through to get Clerks out there is amazing. It's just one of those things where that's not a thing now. He just threw it up on YouTube. Now.
Tim Riggs, thank you so much for the $5. Horror shouldn't even try for China. Too many restrictions on ghost bones, imagery of death. China has a lot of taboos on things horror themed.
And that's probably another reason why they didn't even think about having the voodoo part of Chucky. As long as it's a robot, they can probably show it there.
Yeah.
That's another thing. And I also brought up just before Susan was talking there, I was trying to say was a lot of this has to do more probably with Annabelle than anything.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
So
Annabelle's
MGM's
so
like, what do we got?
successful. Yeah.
Well, then have James Wan direct the freaking Chucky movie then. It might actually be good. I don't know.
You know, the thing of it is that we're going to see good horror, but we're going to see it on streaming services. That's where filmmakers are going to have to look to get their product out. You know, for those people that still want to be, you know, playing in you know, theaters and art houses and stuff, you need to start looking at Shudder. You need to start looking at those type of things, especially if you're a horror filmmaker, because they're the places to go. Because case in point, I've seen 4 episodes of Dead Wax. People were writing it off going, oh, it's just like The Ring. No, it's not. It really isn't. It's very inventive. It's fresh. It does have some elements that are similar to The Ring, but it's kind of like David Lynch meets the Philadelphia Experiment.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
So we are actually looking at, you know, a filmmaker, Graham Resnick, who did Dead Wax, comes from the world of sound. That's why it's about a record and some very odd programming that goes on with it. So we're seeing original things. We just have to go to a different platform.
And that's
out there in the chat as a filmmaker. That's how you need to think. You have to think streaming now.
I was just going to say that kind of answers Lori's question, because that's the only place it's going to happen. Unfortunately, it's going to be such a swamp to dig through.
Yeah.
So luckily you've got places like Shudder who are getting their names out there now as opposed to later, to where a few of these will rise above the rest and survive, but the rest are going to die out in the format wars, which is stuff we talk about on our other shows. And that's what's happening. And Susan's right, because we've got all these streaming services starting up. We got Disney, we've got Warner Brothers starting theirs now. We're sure Disney's going to start another one for Fox and other adult content, unless they take over Hulu somehow, because Universal and Warner Brothers still owns part of Hulu, even though Disney has the majority share. You know, and then so they're all going to be competing with Netflix and Amazon and Hulu for original content, and all these other upstart companies that are coming out, and the TV channels are starting to try and do their own content because they know that they're trying to catch up. And HBO is one of the only ones besides the Stars. I think you did a report about this or said something about this, Susan, or I've seen it somewhere where, yeah, those two are in the top 5 now for streaming services. Yeah.
When I saw that today, I was livid.
Yeah.
I knew that they were doing SVOD when we were dealing with Ash versus Evil Dead. Now, today I see in Deadline, oh, well, now Stars is in the top for SVOD. I'm like, mofos, where were you last year when we could have used that?
Right. And because I would imagine Ash versus Evil Dead is probably one of their number 1 watched things on demand.
Yeah.
I know for a fact that like 3 or 4 of my friends, and myself included, the only reason that we ever, messed with Stars at all was for that, to watch that show. I mean, the rest of their original programming, to my knowledge, is like not anything that
not really
I'm personally interested.
No, because I had it for the longest time through my Amazon app, and true story, I canceled it just before the end of the 3rd season of Ash versus Evil Dead because I was waiting for the end of the season to binge it all. And they jacked up their price by twice as much as it was. So I said, to hell with that. And I canceled it. And I just ended up buying the Blu-ray. And I never watched any of the episodes, so none of that really registered. But that's just it. It's like, it was almost like they didn't try very hard to keep that show going. But anyway, I know that's a soft spot for you too.
It wasn't fitting in with their image. They got taken over by Lionsgate. Lionsgate wanted to go more highbrow. And, people had all these conspiracy theories about, it premiered in February and The Walking Dead. And then the truth of the matter is, what it looked like to me, and I can't, this is just my speculation, is throw it against a wall and see what sticks. Yeah. And that was the only place they could fit Ash versus Evil Dead into, because they were already getting their schedule filled with Counterpart, Outlander, Power, all those shows. So that's what was going on. Lionsgate was shifting them toward more highbrow entertainment, like Outlander, and they were getting specific demographics that they wanted to get, like with Bittersweet and I think Vida. So that's a lot of what happened. And I hate to tell these cable networks, but streaming is going to be where it's at in terms of original programming, because they are getting just as bad as the networks with the stuff that they're putting out, in my estimation.
I mean, yes and no. I feel there's a dearth of crap, but there's also a lot of great stuff coming out right now on the streaming services, like Haunting of Hill House, Sabrina, like all of I could go on, like Room, what's that Mark Duplass thing? Room 120, what?
Yeah, that one. No, I was talking about like Stars and the traditional, not streaming. No, these guys are getting to the point like Stars, and HBO's still trying to stay inventive, but in terms of Stars can't compete with them. And until they figure out how to distribute to other countries, because I know with Ash versus Evil Dead had a lot of people over across the pond that were following it and that really dig Bruce Campbell, but they couldn't see it over there. It wasn't available. And now they cut some deal. I read about that a couple weeks ago. And then somebody came out with Rotten Tomatoes that the entire Evil Dead franchise, including Ash versus Evil Dead, which had a 99% on their Rotten Tomatoes, is like the top Rotten Tomatoes like franchise. Which is just when you sit and think about it, you're like, oh, yeah, okay.
Which should fit in with what they want. Yeah, more highbrow. But, even though Evil Dead, the original film, was very low budget, the same for the other ones, I kind of think of them as a little more highbrow because of Sam Raimi's involvement. And where he went later on.
They were still cinematically, interesting to look at. You had the chasing sort of camera angles through the woods, and you had a lot of innovative stuff, like for as far as cinematography went. So I never thought of them as lowbrow or even low budget half the time, because you don't really think about it when you're watching those movies.
Right, because Raimi's like a carpenter to where he can make 2 cents look like $200.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, Sam did, back when Evil Dead 2 happened, Quentin Tarantino touched on this with History of Horror, Eli Roth's new show on AMC, where he, said that if you were going to movies at that time and you were really a geek about film, you would look at Evil Dead 2 and go, why in the hell aren't we shooting films like this now? Raimi basically invented a new style with his what they called the Sam Cam. I know there's another name for it in the original Evil Dead. And I think why people think of that one as particularly lower in class is because you could see some, foibles in it. Like you can see somebody on the bridge standing at the side of the bridge. And I think it's Rob Tapper. You can see little things that are going on in the background. But they were filmmakers figuring it out. And maybe, hopefully, we have another Sam Raimi out there that's going to have ideas, that's going to come to a streaming service so that we can kind of mitigate this crap that we're getting, like with 2.0 Chucky there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I really, really hope so.
Well, I think a lot of it is just going to be on YouTube with independent filmmakers. You'll have YouTubers who say, hey, I made this movie, here's my DVD. Or, they'll have a channel and say, hey, come kickstart my new movie. Because I see that a lot all the time anyway. And I don't know if like having the movies on streaming services is even going to be profitable if they're like a truly independent, micro budget, no budget sort of filmmaker. They might be able to make something 10 times more entertaining than like, oh, we have like a $5 million budget and we're going to put it on a streaming service and nobody will watch it, so I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends. You have to find and build your audience, because like I know for a fact that like, and I'm not just saying this because I used to work there, but like trauma movies are, you know, will always have an audience, and
Absolutely.
you know, and they're not working, like they don't have micro budgets, but they have significantly smaller budgets than studio films were, and they make twice as much stuff happen in like half as much time because they've been doing it for so long, and then they have the built-in fan base. So it's like you kind of have to think of building a brand for yourself in order to kind of move forward. It has to be a business.
If somebody
Absolutely.
wants to really do this right, we need to reinvent Roger Corman. We need to get somebody that has the sensibilities of Roger Corman when he created American International Pictures and that whole renaissance of horror and B movies from the 50s and the 60s. Somebody out there with good, fiscal sense, good business strategy, has a plan. I think it can be done. I think we can have another Roger Corman.
I think that would be amazing. But the thing that I've noticed over the past, like, I mean, basically ever since Jaws came out, is that what used to be B movies are now blockbusters. You know, like the movies that make the most money are like the monster movies and the, you know, the superhero stuff that would have been considered B movies like before movies like Jaws and stuff like that. So it's
Oh yeah. Well, just look at the Meg. How much money did the Meg make? And that was just a giant killer prehistoric shark that should have by no means have been as entertaining or successful as it was. It should have been a Sci-Fi Channel original movie, and it was. I enjoyed the crap out of that movie. You know.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks again, Tim Riggs, for the $5. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. He says subscription streaming, e.g., Netflix, is the wrong path. VOD streaming is where it needs to go. Small investors can see actual ROI there. Yeah, but a lot of people don't use video on demand as much as just like Netflix or Hulu. That's the other problem. And I mean, just to kind of take it back to the whole thing that Susan was talking about before, Stars is just so far behind everything. That's the other problem.
Mm-hmm.
They were at the end of the game here trying to catch up, because I remember they were at the end of the game when it came to satellite and cable, because they went and spent a buttload of money on getting all the big movies from Disney and Universal and all that kind of crap, and late to the game doing original series, and then they didn't promote Ash right and all kinds of other things, and you know, to go into all the other things you said about it, and to have video on demand, it works in certain instances, but not everybody's going to take a chance and spend $1.99 or better on a movie like they would at a video store anymore, as opposed to if it's already on Netflix there for, in their eyes, for free, because they just pay for the service. Well, they're going to take a chance on it before they do if they're going to just take a chance on a video on demand as well.
Well, Tim Riggs points out something really good, and I was actually just thinking about this too, about like the Steam for those kind of movies, right? So for people who might not know what Steam is, it's basically it's kind of like iTunes for video games. And yeah, I buy a crap ton of video games that I never end up playing because they're $1. So why wouldn't people do that with movies? You just download the movie, you stick it in your whatever, like movie Steam library or whatever.
I don't know if it'll work the same. It could, theoretically.
It could if they're less than maybe $1. Like if the price point is right, people will buy them just to try it out, I think.
But for those out there in the chat, now this is just a perfect example. If you have Amazon Prime, how often do you really buy or rent a movie on there? Or do you just, oh, I want to watch that. Oh, it's not on Prime. Never mind. And go to something else that is on Prime because you don't want to pay for it.
Well, I know I get frustrated because I go out there and I look at obscure places. Like I looked at Canopy for which is a streaming service for universities and such, and they have a horror section with some interesting selections, and I know there's some things that I want to see that, you know, aren't prevalent anymore, and they're nowhere to be found on Amazon Prime. You can't get them on even Shudder. Somebody needs to remedy that. I don't know who, but there's a gold mine out there to do this online and to do it right.
Well, you have to find out it it's who owns everybody. There's like so many people that have rights to like and it's just it's a huge, like, that's why, you know, all streaming services have what they have, and like there's people who work at each studio that specifically work in like licensing the films out, you know, and so it's hard. It's hard to get the rights, especially for stuff that people forget about, like movies that are kind of underseen or whatever. You have to really like do your homework to figure out who has the rights to the film.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It seems like every film franchise now has fakakta rights. It's like you've got somebody over here. Hypothetically speaking, I made 3 movies. Okay. I produced them and everything. The first one I own. The other 2, I went into partnership with studios at the time because I wanted to get a bigger fan base, a bigger market. And then I come to find out when I go back years later, I don't have the rights to this. I can't make a film off of it. And we're seeing a lot of that, not just in horror, but like even in, you know, in the world of superheroes. It's just
and Halloween's a perfect example of that. They've been to court, I think, at least 3 times over the rights of who owns what and who can do what and where and when and why. To where I think even this last film found itself in court before it came out, if I remember the documentary we did right. So yeah, you're right on that. And this has started years ago, and even back when the bigger studios bought up all the little guys back in the 30s and 40s into the 50s. And then it happened again in the 80s and 90s, and with the independent studios getting all bought up. So it's like you have all these conglomerated studios and who owns the rights to what, where, when, and why. And then you have a situation like with Child's Play, to where in Halloween as well, where they made the first film here with another studio, and then the rights were sold later on to another studio, and then another studio and another studio in the case of Halloween. So yeah, they have that problem. And Andre always says the biggest issue is going to be with the streaming wars, finding what you want to watch.
Oh yeah.
And that's what, especially, you know, Mecca and Susan and Laura, you're all talking about there, is that it's going to be like going through hell to find all this shit, and how much is it going to cost you to go to all these services. And that's where a video on demand system will be more helpful, if you're able to get to both. Like if you're able to have it on one streaming service and also have it on demand other places, where even though you got to pay for it, it's still available. That's one thing Susan's bringing up as far as like availability. That's another issue going to be coming up in the digital age. But the other problem is, like Andre always says, you're going to lose a lot of your favorite franchises, and they're not going to get a chance to soar because you're not going to be able to find them. We already are getting rumors and hearing shit about YouTube, how their YouTube Red or YouTube whatever is pretty much dead
now.
What's that?
It's now, I believe, YouTube Premiere because
yeah, but it's pretty much
because of the porn connection. They didn't want it. Yeah, that whole thing.
So basically, I'm not going to be surprised, even if it's a hit, that we don't get another season of Cobra Kai after the second one, because from what I've been hearing, it's all pretty much dead as far as their original programming. Jeez. They're just going to stick to what they know, and that is their YouTuber people, and they're going to try and get things back to the way it was. But I think the damage is already done. But that's a whole nother podcast. But anyway, you know, it's just, this is what's going to happen: is you're going to see all these franchises get bought up by all these other streaming services. So. Yeah, but speaking of like streaming and the studios involved with them and the cable aspect of it and them getting involved, one series that's huge on not only when it's on, but in streaming afterwards was Walking Dead, and I say was because it's not as big as it used to be. Yeah. I never got in the show. I don't know if you did, Mecca, but I can imagine Lori and
actually,
Lori will have a few things to say about it if not.
Actually, I feel so like I'm betraying everyone because I'm from Atlanta, but I only watched like the first 2 seasons. But I
don't be ashamed of that.
Yeah, I mean,
I'll say more than I did. So.
Yeah, I appreciate the show, and I know how much work goes into it because I've known quite a few people who've either been zombies or have worked in like the art department or production design and all that stuff. So I definitely appreciate what this show did for the film industry in Atlanta. It like really kicked it off. Like this, The Walking Dead and Tyler Perry, which is hilarious. Like, but those two like just catapulted Atlanta into like the sphere of relevance as far as like shooting location goes.
Yeah.
So I definitely appreciate that about the show, and I heckin' love Norman Reedus. So there's that, but that's about all that I can really say.
Well, I can't say anything else other than people keep telling me I should love the show. I know how much it's had an impact on society. I love Romero. I'd love if they pay respect to that. I respect and love many of the people that make the show. I was kind of waiting for it to be done to binge on it. And that's all I really have to say about that. Other than that, Mecca, and then you guys can take the story from there.
Well, so I was really excited at first, and like you, Lori, love Norman Reedus on there. I was really loving a lot of the characters on the show, but I kept going through this whole thing season after season, and I stopped at around 5, I want to say, where they would split up and then spend the season trying to find the rest of the group or the other group, and then they would find each other and then they would split up again. And after like the 75th time that they did that, I'm like, you know what, I'm done, I'm out, I'm not, you know, they just spent all this time getting like Glenn and Maggie back together and now they're gonna split up. Oh my god. So that's about where I ended with that show.
Sorry, I just remember that I found out about like and I like Jeffrey Dean Morgan just like as an actor, but I found out about Negan through the Dave Chappelle episode of SNL where he did like a parody of what happened to Glenn, and I was like, oh man, like I wanted to somehow catch up to that, but I never did. But I found out about it through that parody, which I think is kind of funny. But anyway, Susan.
No, I'm just thinking about the whole phenomenon of The Walking Dead, and I will give tip my hat to them for making horror mainstream, for bringing it, back into the fold and the public knowledge again. It never went away. Horror never goes away, but it loses its spotlight after a while. And these guys help to put it on the map again. I mean, you've got Greg Nicotero, who is, like a Romero disciple, and he's, heading the show. Now they have Angela Kang. You've got Gail Ann Hurd behind it. But what's interesting about this show is that it can lose 1 million, viewers, and it's still better than some of the shows on the platform that are barely getting views. Because people keep on saying, why is this still on the air? Why are they still putting it on the air? Yeah, every year we hear viewership declines, but when you look at the viewership, like last year when I was following the ratings, they had like routinely 5-6 million people watching that show. And, that's pretty significant numbers that many people are still tuning in. But what they did to the fans are upset now because some of them feel it was like a clickbaity thing. We're all going to see what happens to Andrew Lincoln and Rick Grimes. And then, I guess I should say, well, if anybody hasn't seen it out in the chat, maybe you want to mute it or whatever.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, spoiler alert. Thank you. Yeah, basically, it's kind of like he blows up, apparently. But what's interesting is he's coming back for movies now.
I don't understand that. The thing that I thought was cool when reading about it is that Shane came back. I think that's like that's basically why I stopped watching, is because Shane wasn't on there anymore. I love John Bernthal.
John Bernthal, yeah,
best part of the show. And so I think it's cool that they brought him back. I'm not saying that I don't like Andrew Lincoln or that I don't like any of the actors. It's just like I thought that the dynamic that Shane brought to the show was very interesting.
Yeah, and that's interesting because DJ Odyssey is like, yeah, Shane came back as a dream, like all the characters did that were off the show came back as a dream. Yeah, he was found downstream. It was fake. And that's how they're going to start, that's how they're going to start the movies. But we all kind of had hints of it, if people would have been paying attention over the summer, when Andrew Lincoln was at, I believe, one of the Comic-Cons, he actually said that his presence would be felt on the show and he's never going to leave Rick Grimes behind. And even Gail Ann Hurd chimed in and said yes, his presence will echo throughout the show. Now I have a theory about how they're going to keep Rick around. Yeah, the movies, but on the show, I think, and I may be wrong, I think Michonne is going to be pregnant.
Oh, okay.
Because there was a scene with them where they were discussing the future and the fear of the future, and they wanted to stay the way it is now because right now it's pretty placid. Well, placid for TWD, but they wanted it, he and Michonne were having this heart-to-heart. And he looked at her poignantly and said, well, there's something we can do about it. I'm just paraphrasing. And that led into a lovemaking episode. So that just put it in my mind, like foreshadowing there's going to be a baby on the way and Rick's legacy.
Yeah. I mean, that seems valid. I just wonder how much longer do you think this show's going to go on, y'all?
I think it has an order for next year.
Do you think it could go beyond that?
I honestly hope not, because in looking at the shows that last this long, yeah, I watched Law and Order for years, and I watched SVU for years.
I still watch SVU.
Yeah, I stopped after a while. Things got. I had other things to do, but it was getting to be the same sort of premise. And you said it very well. I think it was Mecca. You said it very well. You can start to telegraph and see what's going to happen every episode. Like people are going to get together, they're going to break up. And how many times can you do that? And then you'll jump the shark, or you'll have my favorite episodes when the writer's room runs out of ideas. We stick somebody in a bomb shelter, or we put them somewhere where they have no access to anything and the characters have to deal with one another. And you can only do so many of those. I don't think it has much life left in it. I mean, I don't see how fans are constantly complaining about it. But like I said, conversely, it still has some ratings. I mean, it's drastically dropped. So it depends on whether Nicotero and Gail Ann Hurd want to move on, I guess, and whether the principals want to move on and do other stuff.
And I imagine they're getting to the point where they don't want to be doing the same roles forever. They want to move on to movies and whatever else they want to move on to.
Well, who's even still on the show that's been there since the beginning?
Yeah, I don't think anybody. Well, I stopped watching even before Negan came on.
Well, they do have it right in that if you're going to have longevity, you do need to switch characters out. MASH kind of started that, and you have to do that to keep it fresh, to keep the storyline fresh. But I think what started the downfall, from what I remember and what I heard and everything, was when they brought Negan in. And I love JDM too. I think he's a great actor. But for some reason, Negan was very polarizing with the purists from Walking Dead. And, they didn't like what was happening. And why did we bring him into it? And that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Thanks again, Tim Riggs. $2. Thank you so much. Hollywood forgot, always leave them wanting more. Yes, they did. Yep, they sure did.
Okay. Sorry. Since I am so behind on this, so Norman Reedus isn't even on there anymore?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Reedus is on.
Okay.
Daryl is very much on. Now, the rumor was when Andrew Lincoln left that everybody was saying, oh, Daryl's going to take over now. Daryl's going to be the leader. And Norman Reedus said at New York Comic Con, he's like, look, I think it's number 24. I've been number 24 on the call sheet. I want to stay there. Andrew Lincoln was number 1, and that's the way it should be. So yeah, Reedus is definitely still there.
Okay.
And JDM, I think, is locked up now. Well, currently locked up, but he's there.
Wow. I can't even remember who's on the show. It's been so long since I've watched it.
Yeah.
But even like the last couple of seasons, I was just kind of falling asleep on every episode because nothing happened. I remember there was like a whole season where they complained about a fence.
Oh, well,
they're at a prison and they were complaining about a fence for like a whole season, only to just have the fence wiped out in like 3 seconds by a tank.
Well, you make a very good point there, Mecca, with the whole, with the whole show. It's too long. And people used to bitch about Ash versus Evil Dead. Oh my God, we need more than a half hour. No, you don't. Because then you run the risk of having the lull of The Walking Dead, where nothing's really going on. And then, as we say in Nerdrotic, it becomes, feelings in a silo somewhere. Yeah, I don't know. If they seem to have a lot of faith in Angela Kang, because she was a writer on the show. She's now the showrunner. So, they're kind of, hoping that she comes through, because Norman Reedus said this year is going to see some characters step up because of Andrew Lincoln's departure. And it's also going to get more female centric.
Oh, that's great. I like that. But something that I feel like that they could do, and just in general for a lot of shows that are on network television, is that they could run them for a shorter amount of time, like kind of like how they do on streaming, or like British television shows where there's just like a 12 episode season and not like a 24 episode season, which I like, and then they have the hiatus and all that stuff. I don't know. I mean, that's kind of just my personal feeling about that, but
the trend is getting toward I have this theory, and I've said it on Nerdrotic, and it's starting to come to fruition now, is I think people should just pitch 3 seasons of a show. Just 3 seasons. 8 episodes, 10 episodes, that's it.
Yeah.
The format that we're seeing now, like you said, Lori, is dying. Nobody has the attention span to keep up with the show that's like, 26 episodes anymore. So we're seeing like the gradual, and what happens anyway, if you want 4 or 5 seasons, invariably at the 3rd season, you get what I call the pregnant pause. Nobody says anything to you from the network. You're pacing around going, is my show going to be canceled? Is my show going to, what's happening with my show? Oh, well, you'll find out a couple months later. That deadline comes and goes, what's going on with my show? It happens to every show. So I'm like, let's just cap it at 3. And if they want a 4th season, negotiate.
Yeah.
That's the way I look at it.
I mean, yeah, that's really smart. Because there's only a few shows that are really that good after the 3rd season, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah. And it like Tim Riggs said, leave them wanting more. You can wrap up a show in 3 seasons. It can be done.
I mean, Pretty Dreadful, I feel like was perfect.
But it's coming back. Well, they're just using the name.
Well, like you said, the old format. The old format is predicated on syndication.
Yeah.
It's getting to that 100 episodes. Syndication isn't a thing really anymore.
No.
I mean, it is, but it's not in the world of streaming and Netflix. Yeah. Like you said, after about 3, and they already know this on Netflix, after about the 3rd or 4th season, people start dropping off.
Yeah.
They don't binge anymore because it gets tedious.
You lose interest too. Yeah. I mean, you want to move on to something else, and this is why shows like Simpsons, at least, and South Park, even for me, like I stopped watching them years and years and years ago. South Park, I at least catch up to every now and then. I'll be like, okay, I'm like 3 seasons behind. Time to marathon it.
See, they changed their format. See, the only seasons they ever had that were real long were like the 2nd, 3rd, and maybe 4th season. After that, they switched down to where it was like 13 episodes, and then 10 episodes. So yeah, they're more in line with that streaming format now.
I can't believe that South Park is still on. That show's been on since I was in high school. Like
It's still relevant for now, but this season and maybe the next one I think is going to be the last, if not. So I think they're ramping up to that.
Yeah,
I think Simpsons are about done too. I think their goal is to get to 30 or 31 seasons, and they're done.
oh, that could have happened a while ago, personally.
Yeah, they
Right,
kind of
but
ended
those shows
at
are a little
20.
evergreen. You're talking more episodic type shows, and that happens to me with like Star Trek even sometimes, to where I get so far and it's like, okay, time to move on to something else. This is just getting too much. And it's not that I dislike the show or anything like that. It's just there's only so much you can take at a time. I mean, I enjoy binging a show, but I also hate the waiting factor where it's either waiting if you got to repeat, or months or a year in between a season. So I generally like to wait until it's done so I can watch it at my own pace. But anyway, that's all.
Yeah, that's kind of how I am too. Like there's so many shows like, yeah, it's on right now. I probably won't watch it until it's wrapped, Like people tell me, "Oh, watch The Expanse." Yeah, but it's on right now. I mean, what if they really screw up the last season or this next season, and then I'm left with a show that I get invested in, and then they, completely.
Jim Murray has a really good point here. He was talking about Breaking Bad, which, by the way, Breaking Bad is coming, is going to be done as a movie now. They're going to do movies. But Breaking Bad left everybody on a high note, left everybody, they were happy for what they had. And it gives like he says, it's an example of how to leave on a high note and have an audience ready for a new idea and give yourself time to make an idea work. And apparently that's what they've done. They've taken some time. Now, there was some rumors about, some of the cast appearing on Better Call Saul, and that was, basically nipped in the bud. But yeah, Breaking Bad, they went out on a high note. Yeah, and a lot of these producers and stuff, the money's flowing. They've got expenditures outside of their creativity that they have to keep, they have to put a roof over their head. So, I mean, they're going to want to keep their baby going for as long as they can. But at what cost? At what cost do you keep this going when your audience is getting bored with it? And like you guys were saying, nobody. The whole thing that's antiquated about the Nielsen's and the way the networks look at it is the fact that they expect people to sit down and watch a TV show when it airs. And if you don't do that, then they look at cancellation or moving a time slot. But here's the thing. They do track DVR views. It's called +5, +7s. And they track those, and the +5s, +7s are the windows of time. If you don't watch it within that time frame, then it's not counted toward the views. The problem is that they calculate these views in time. So it just ends up being, where nobody has the time to sit down and watch network television or even watch a show on cable, where it's, actually it doesn't really matter because they don't really have the advertising that the networks have to deal with. But that's the whole thing. They just want people sitting there and watching their show. It's very antiquated. We don't do that anymore.
I have to kind of disagree. In general, I agree with you, but there's a couple of shows I think that like break that format. And one of them is like a horror thing, and maybe it's just me, but like I have to watch American Horror Story like the night that it comes on, when it comes on, like maybe because I'm obsessed with it. But another one that's like the absolute, like Game of Thrones. Everybody wants to watch Game of Thrones when it comes on.
I'm 2 seasons behind, actually.
Well,
and I've got them sitting right there, and I haven't watched it.
Everybody, but like
call appointment setting. That's what they call an appointment setting show. Your Game of Thrones, your American Horror Story. Yeah, those are exceptions.
But those are just because everybody wants to be able to talk about them around the water cooler
Yeah.
next morning. That's the big thing there. And that's expected. And that's what is very left of TV, but it's dying quickly.
Yeah.
It's not like it used to be. People aren't staying through shows. You look at shows like Smallville, which had a plan up to like the 5th season, and then they didn't really have a plan. And you can tell the show goes on all kinds of crazy fucking avenues and areas just to kind of stay away from what their whole original initial goal was even longer. And you get into that and it's like, okay, so they're dragging. It's like, you know, the typical thing in any show where it's like, are they, aren't they going to get together? Aren't they going to get together kind of thing? You can only drag it out for so long. And then once they get together, the thrill is gone. You know, it's like, how much more can we drag out now? We don't want to see this part. We already knew what this was going to consist of. You know what I mean? And that's the way a lot of these shows go. You know, it's just one example, but you have that in a million different ways with a lot of shows, and you have to find ways to keep them fresh. And if a show has a plan from beginning to end, like a movie, those tend to work better than the shows that aren't, at least in my experience.
Theoretically, if you want to be successful, you should have a plan for every season. That's
right.
what the writer's room is for.
Well, it's not even just an overall plan. Like, okay, like at least by the you want to get here. You know, you can give yourself a little leeway, but you know, I like your idea of, you know, sign up for 2 or 3 seasons, at least sign up for 1 for sure. And then if we get a second season, then we negotiate from there kind of thing. Cause then you're at least keeping a show fresh and you're not constant and you're forcing your writers to finish some of their story arcs within the season, still leaving some things open to possibility. But that's my problem is I used to get into shows and I just got rid of cable altogether, is because I got so sick and tired of every show I'd get into would get canceled and it would just end. You know, it's like I don't get any kind of satisfaction out of it. I don't get an ending out of it. At least stuff like Deadwood's getting a movie to kind of help finish that off, but you're not going to get that very often.
No. And the thing of it is that it also, if you only do like 3 seasons, okay, with an option for a 4th, but you don't even pitch that. The thing of it is if you do 3 seasons, then you're not going to, there's no other expectations. The writers don't have to worry about, oh my God, what's going to happen? Are we going to be canceled? Okay, we're going to do 3 seasons. That's it. And if it goes after that, that way it frees you up to be creative. So you're not going to be worried about other crap. And you're going to be able to concentrate on your show. And you're going to be able to give the people what they want. You know, and then when you get to the point where, you know, where the network's like, well, where are you today? Do you think you want to do a 4th season? Then you start planning ahead of time for that, which, you know, that's what they do. But so many times we see people like George R.R. Martin. They get their hands in too many pies. They've got, you know, you get Brian Fuller who comes into a series and then next thing you know, goodbye, Brian Fuller. He's been there for 5 minutes.
Whether it's his fault or not, but right. That happens on all kinds of different shows. So there's nothing you can really do about that. And speaking of shows, unless anybody else has anything more to add to this Deadwood. I'm just talking about Deadwood, so that's why it was in my mind. Walking Dead situation. I mean, I have nothing to add to it. So unless any of you ladies do, we can probably move on to the next story.
No, nothing to add.
But something that has to do with both television and movies is something that I'm a huge fan of, and the only reason that I have Shudder. I used to have it, but I'm like, I have all these movies, and then they brought back Joe Bob Briggs. So I had to get Shudder. So we're going to get some more. I mean, you can almost kind of consider this like a season 2, I guess, of Joe Bob, because we got like, I think it was like 10 movies that he did in the same vein that he always used to do for TNT and the movie channel before that. And now he's going to do a Thanksgiving themed one. Is that what it is, Susan? Tell us all about this.
He's doing Dinners of Death. That's going to be the theme for Black Thursday. And he's got a whole schedule of movies that he's going to be watching. You know, it's going to be the same as when they broke the internet, literally in July. But they've made it so that won't happen. Hopefully, that's what they're saying. So Joe Bob's coming back for Thanksgiving. He's coming back for Christmas, and then next year he's got a series. So we don't know anything about that as of yet, but he's going to be regular. And it was interesting because he was putting feelers out on Twitter before Shudder even said, yeah, we're going to do this with you again. And the way he started following me is I was like, you know, I retweeted something of his, and the concern is that women wouldn't be interested in the show.
Oh, hell no. And
That's
no.
basically what I said. And the next thing I know, he's following me, and then he DM'd me. And it was like, oh, well, that was interesting. But yeah, I mean, just the mere fact that the network would have even considered, well, no, women, what have you, you know, they're not going to watch, is so ridiculous, because women do watch horror films.
Absolutely. And actually, if he wants to come on the show and promote this, you know, we would love to have him on the show. Because
I just wrote that in the private chat.
I wanted to like do a little shout out here, because I actually know some people that helped put everything together for this latest Joe Bob stuff that he's doing. And their names are John Brennan and Justin Martell and Matt Mangiaritis, and they all used to work at Troma Entertainment. And went on to like work on this new Joe Bob project, and they're awesome guys. And John told me a thing just earlier today, that in addition to all the other stuff, the with the Thanksgiving and the Christmas special, that they're going to come out with a special edition 45 record of the theme song.
Oh, yes.
Nice.
Yeah. And but I just wanted to give a shout out to them. Those same guys also worked on the new Troma movie that's going to be coming out, that Lloyd Kaufman directed, called Shakespeare's Shitstorm. And you know, I hope that they have some Troma movies on the next Joe Bob series. I think that would be amazing.
Absolutely.
I think they had at least one on the last one. I'm trying to remember which one it would have been, but I think there was one. I could be wrong.
Yeah, sorry for my shameless Troma plugs. I have to do it.
No, that's fine. I'm a Troma fan, so
Those are my people. So, you know, I have to do my shameless.
No, I would have got more. If you get me going on Corman and Troma, it's like they're like the real film school, if you ask me.
Yeah.
Because we have so many huge people come out of those two camps that it's just crazy. But yeah.
Well, not only that, you also have like actual creativity coming from those two. And it's not, how do I put this without being insulting to Hollywood? It's not the same corporate bullshit that we see over and over and over again with the focus groups and the the reshoots and the test audiences.
What with the baby? Okay.
Yeah.
What with a dog? Okay.
The thing with the low budget horror movie, or like with independent movies, and especially like in the case of Troma and Roger Corman, is that people think that these things aren't intelligent. Like they look at them at a face value and they're like, oh, this is stupid. But the people who are making these movies are actually very intelligent, very savvy, like very, you know, have a intellectual depth and everything, but they're just like, they know that they can do whatever they want, so they do it. And like, it's fun to see like this silly stuff coming out of these really smart, talented people.
Right. And that brings us right back around to Joe Bob, because that's what he does.
Yeah.
He points out these things. And that's what I love about his shows, is even though it's a shtick, you know, to a way, but you know, his film knowledge is just vast, and he throws all these things at you that even I don't know sometimes, which I know a lot of shit.
You're looking at a guy that graduated from Vanderbilt, worked in New York, actually started out as a sports reporter.
Oh, wow.
Along with like Skip Bayless and such. You know, they were around the same time. Found out that he really enjoyed reviewing movies more. And the type of movies that he championed were not the type that you would see on Siskel and Ebert.
Right.
So, you know, Joe Bob kind of came around at a good time.
Then they were more like the B movies at drive-ins and stuff like that. Yeah. That's what he kind of referred to. And actually, Cinemassacre did a really great interview with him here recently. But yeah. Sorry, Susan.
No. I you know, and it's good to see Shudder embracing him. It's, you know, embracing this whole thing, because Shudder, I will say, does love horror. And that's always good. And they are the most pleasant people to work with, to get you whatever you need, screeners, what have you. They're just great to work with. So I'm really glad there's places like Shudder around.
Absolutely.
People that, you know, I mean, Chiller didn't last, and that was unfortunate. Shudder's got AMC behind it. So AMC definitely is loving horror, because Eli Roth's show is like through the roof for them.
Yeah, I need to catch up on that, because I liked the first I watched like the first couple. I liked those. But what I was gonna say about Joe Bob is that watching his show on TV as a kid was kind of how I got introduced to all this stuff to begin with.
Yeah.
So it's I really appreciate the fact that he's, you know, back at it for like maybe you know, a new audience of teenagers or young adults to kind of like, maybe they'll see those movies and be like, oh, I want to do this. You know what I mean? And I think that's fantastic.
Well, yeah, between Joe Bob Briggs and you had Gilbert Gottfried, Rhonda Shear, all of the kind of B movie sort of hosts. That's where a lot of my taste in movies come from. From watching all that as a kid, really young.
I've been trying to talk Doomcock into doing a show like that for a while. We all have, I think. But anyway, no, yeah, I'm such a huge Joe Bob fan, and I'm glad to hear this, because I knew he was talking about doing some more, but I had no idea he had signed on for even more than that, like Susan had just said. So I guess I'm keeping Shudder for a while.
Yeah.
So I still have to finish up the first ones, but I mean, it's just, yeah, it's when you get in the right mood at a midnight on a Saturday or Sunday or whatever, and you throw one of them on. And I've seen most of the movies a million times, but I love hearing his commentary and seeing his skits. I mean, I used to watch some of its old clips on YouTube all the time before this show came on. So it's kind of cool finally have them back, and they're new and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, he definitely brings his own unique spin to, you know, to these films with the kill counts and all the stuff that he does, the breast counts. I mean, that's really inventive. That's very, very funny.
He counts them by the boot.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you know, when I was growing up, we didn't have Joe Bob. We had him when I was, you know, toward like my early 20s. But, you know, we had local people like Svengoolie, and you had the Ghoul in Detroit. For me, it was Dr. Shock out of Philly. So they were like pre-Joe Bob Briggs, and they taught you that love of B movies and strange things that, you know, you wouldn't really see in a movie theater. And that's kind of where you start to fall in love with that genre.
Yeah.
It's through people like Joe Bob and through people like Svengoolie and the Ghoul and Dr. Shock.
Oh,
yes, Svengoolie is still on, right? But I was just using him as an example of one of these type guys.
I mean, I'm glad that we did have Joe Bob, because I was always sort of, because in so many horror movies, but I can think specifically like in the Rob Zombie movies, they'll show like somebody watching one of the, like an old TV show with the horror host. And I'm like, man, why did I not get to have that when I was a kid? But I did. It just wasn't.
Yeah, you had a different costume. Yeah, you had Joe Bob, and Rob Zombie and I had whomever was around at the time. Like, I don't know who was in Massachusetts for him, but you know, since we're kind of like contemporaries in the same age group, yeah, that's what we grew up on. And it's funny you mentioned Rob, because Joe Bob told me he feels that Rob Zombie is like one of the auteurs of horror.
I agree, and so he's like a very divisive guy. Like, there's people who, like, I love his movies. There's so many people that hate his movies too, and I am not really sure why that is, to be quite honest, because I guess I'm like blinded by my fandom or whatever, but I don't really understand why people wouldn't like his stuff.
Well, I can weigh in on this a little bit because I think for me, my love of horror is kind of the older, more obscure stuff, and Rob Zombie definitely has a huge love and appreciation for it, and that's one of the things I do love about him. But when I watch his movies, I find them to be almost too brutal, almost too gory, and some of the cinematography just doesn't click with me. They feel too modern. So, I mean, I don't hate them at all. I just tend to go to something else. You know, I'll watch one, or I'll watch them once in a while, but no, I don't always like go directly to his movies.
He's an acquired taste, and the only one of his movies that I really hate is H2. Other than that, I haven't seen 31 yet, and I think one of his other ones, but otherwise I've seen them all, and I really like Devil's Rejects.
I think Devil's Rejects is a classic, honestly.
So, I mean, outside of that, I mean, they're all pretty good. I mean, Halloween, there's elements of it I like, there's elements I don't like, but, you know, outside of that, like I said, I hate H2. So,
I never saw that. I saw like bits and pieces of it, and I had heard so many bad things that I just kind of didn't really want to ruin my love of him, so I haven't watched it yet.
So, but no, he's one of those, like I said, I think is more of an acquired taste for a lot of the reasons that Mecca just brought up, because he is a bit more brutal. But with him, you know what you're getting.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
no, it's
really,
not a fault at all. I mean,
yeah.
I absolutely have respect for that. It's just a personal taste for me. I mean,
yeah.
Zombie, what I like about him is he's like a curator of horror. He's like a guy I would love to sit down and talk with, not only about horror, but about other movies too. And a lot of people don't know this, but he has a great love for Groucho Marx. So much so that he optioned Groucho's assistant's book and has been wanting to make this movie since 2015. He even alludes to some of Groucho's shtick in his movies if you pay attention to it.
Well, Captain Spaulding is a reference from one of the Marx Brothers movies. I can't remember.
Definitely, yes. That's the one in specific, yeah. He just seems like he's so knowledgeable. He loves the genre. He loves film in general. And if anybody out there is interested in this, Jon Favreau did a series called, I think it was something Dinner for Five.
Oh, I love that show.
Best shows that he had was
a little difficult to find, but yeah.
And Roger Corman and Rob Zombie and Bruce Campbell and another guy whose last name is Love, and forgive me, I can't remember who it was. I want to say Faison Love.
Oh, Faison Glove. Yeah.
Go, and if you like these guys, go and watch that. It's on YouTube. It's fabulous. It's all about B-movie making, talking about horror. It's just, it's really educational too. So check that out. It is on YouTube.
I wish they'd release that series proper, because he had a lot of good ones on there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
The Kevin Smith and J.J. Abrams one, that was great.
Yeah, but speaking of Joe Bob, though, check him out on YouTube. Check out some of his stuff if you haven't. If you think you like him, and then jump over to Shudder, and you got more to check out there. So
yeah, watch all the Joe Bob stuff. Now.
We're not actually promoting him, but if we could have him on here, that'd be great.
Yeah.
well,
why not promote him? He's well worth a promotion.
Yeah,
anyway.
well, yeah, he's pretty much all of us here, it sounds like. So yeah, definitely one of the reasons why I get into a lot of the behind the scenes stuff. And because a lot of that stuff was the reason why I got into this stuff, was because when I was real little, certain horror movies and shit scared me. So then I found out how they were made, and that kind of started the whole ball rolling. So yeah. But anyway, was there anything else then to cover besides that tonight, boys and girls? Or should I say I'm the only boy here, so just count.
Yeah, no, I think that's all. I mean, it's kind of like a little bit of a lull with, any horror news that would be worth mentioning right now, at least.
Right.
Yeah. We're in that lull now. Halloween's died down a little bit. We're getting in toward the holidays. Probably when things will get jumping again, January with Glass, because Glass is coming out.
Yes. Oh, I'm so excited.
I'm sure we'll hear a lot of revival news between now and then, though.
Oh, yeah.
We'll see. We'll see how that goes. Do we have any questions from the group real quick before we close this episode of Goddesses of Gore? Let's see what we got here. I know we had one for Susan earlier. Where'd it go? We answered it in the chat, but
You talking about the Sam Raimi one?
not sure. I don't think so. I think it was about streaming, but I'm not finding it here.
Patrick Olinger, what's the name of the documentary that's on YouTube? Dinner for Five.
Yeah, if you can find as many as you can, they're great. They were a great show. I think it was on Stars, wasn't it?
No,
might have been.
Yes, maybe. I think it was on Showtime.
Showtime or Stars? Yeah, I can't remember which.
More like it.
I remember catching quite a few when it was actually on, but yeah.
Yeah, me too. I wish that it was still on.
Well, Eli.
Oh yeah, here it is. Tim Riggs was talking about how they change writers so often into shows, and it starts something great, and then a studio cuts costs and brings in cheaper talent and carry it. Yeah, that's another issue that happens. I don't know if you wanted to elaborate a little bit on that, Susan, at all.
About bringing in cheaper writers. You know, invariably they'll start shaking things up and they'll change head writers. And I get it because they want to do they want to move forward. But my thing is if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If you've got people that know the characters, know how to write for those characters, and that's important. Just because you can write doesn't mean you can write a film, doesn't mean you can write for television. There's different types of writing. And, you know, because you're a novelist doesn't necessarily mean you can adapt that into a medium. So it's like if you find people that get characters that can speak in their voice, then you need to keep those people and don't shake it up. That's my feeling with it. But I know they do that. Well, and I know they oust people all the time. Yeah.
Well, what happens is a lot of the time as well is that these people, the writers who've been there for a long time, their contract ends and they want to get a raise.
Yeah.
Because of the work that they've done to make this show successful, but because they're a writer and not the director or the actor, there's not as much, you know, focus and money and stuff that they'll put into them because they feel like writers are more disposable than actors or directors.
And that's a shame.
Yeah.
If you don't have something, and I'm not saying this because I'm a writer, but and I've always thought about this, even when I was in film school, it's like, even if you don't have a story on the page, you don't have a movie. You can have all the bells and whistles, technology speaking. You can know how to wield a camera, but you have to have a story. And that's where Hollywood gets it wrong. You need to start thinking that writers are important. Yeah. Writers can become showrunners. And a lot of times when writers are showrunners, those are your better shows. Because case in point, Vince Gilligan, Breaking Bad.
Oh, yeah.
You know, you can't fault that. Did his time over at the X-Files, went over to Breaking Bad. I mean, it's just because writers have a different sensibility. And, you know, if it weren't for writers, what are directors going to direct? What's Spielberg going to direct? You know?
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. Who is Lori? Lori, why don't you tell him who you are?
I write for 1428 Elm, Film Threat, Nightmarish Conjurings, Horror Talk, and I used to work at Trauma Entertainment, and I write short stories, essays, poems, everything. Working on a screenplay right now, so that's me. Lori Kikta. You can follow me at the Kikta on Twitter.
All right, there's a couple other ones here. Well, April says it's the Marks.
April. Yeah, the exception would be that franchise whose name I won't speak. Yeah, that would be Let's Go to Camp again and get it right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. No, I don't think the Halloween movies will go back to the anthology. Somebody asked that earlier. That was RT66. I don't think they'll ever go back to the anthology unless anybody else does.
Blue
Not
Cat
especially
has a
for the new one.
question. Which version of it is superior and why?
Oh, balls.
Oh Lord.
We'll be here all night.
Ugh.
I have my answer. Probably not going to be a popular one.
The book.
Yeah, the book, yeah.
Leave the book out of this.
The book, yeah. Yeah, I mean, for me personally, yeah, the book when I read it was very cinematic. And then when I heard that it was going to be done, I was all excited. And then what I got was contrary to my excitement.
Mm-hmm.
I loved Tim Curry in it. That's about all I loved. The rest of it was like, let's throw all the popular TV stars in of the day and get this film. Now, I know Tommy Lee Wallace did it, and that's no disrespect to him, but it just seemed that way to me with that. Which one do I prefer? I prefer the Andy Muschietti it. I think he captured a lot of the bittersweetness of it. And that story that always underlies King's work is about family, not necessarily your own, but the family bonds that you forge and friendship. And he's always got that undercurrent. What would you do for people you love type deal? Like Cujo is a very good example of that. But I just found that it, for me, worked on a lot of different levels, especially with the kids and their acting ability. And, you know, Pennywise was different. Tim Curry, yeah, he was good at Pennywise, but he was a different kind of Pennywise than Bill Skarsgård is trying to do with him. So for me, the current it was more my speed.
Yeah, I think Tim Curry was a better Pennywise for me, but I think the new movie was probably better for me.
I'm gonna be like the odd one out here when I really just think that there's very few successful Stephen King adaptations. Like, I feel like his books are always better than the movies, but I mean, that's such a purist, like, lame point of view to have, but that's kind of with it and The Stand, I feel like they just shouldn't have never been made into movies personally.
Dead Zone is my favorite of the King adaptations. Well, Stand By Me is a short story. That's different. And same with Shawshank. But in terms of his Dead Zone, I think David Cronenberg did a good job of getting that one right.
Yeah. I mean, I think Dead Zone and The Shining are like the only two. And otherwise, I would much rather read the book. Carrie also.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to be the other odd duck out. I prefer the original miniseries, and I'll give you a couple quick reasons. I try to look at movies and adaptations differently than, you know, most situations, because Jaws is a perfect example of how, a third of the book is in the movie, but it's still a superior film to the book in a lot of ways, because it really captured exactly what the book was about and broke it down to its essence. And I feel like Tommy Lee Wallace's version does that a little bit better with the characters. And the new movie to me was more of a remake of that version than it was the book. Mm-hmm. If it would have been different if they went and readapted the book. No, they didn't. They just did a remake of Tommy Lee's version and tried to avoid certain things. And in the end, screwed up some of those connections that you're talking about, Susan. Like, perfect example is the blood in the bathroom. In the TV movie, at least they show you that Beverly tries to clean it up several times and it won't stay clean until the group does it together. That's when she figures out, wait a minute, if we did this together and it stays away now, if we do this as a group, we're stronger. See, and they don't have that moment. They have that moment in the new. Me, what a lot of the new one is a lot of buildup. That does a lot of the payoff without the buildup, and then the ending just kind of goes weird with Beverly getting kidnapped. And I didn't like Skarsgård as Pennywise. He did okay, but Tim got it right. You want to lure the kids in and then get scary. Tim could pull off both ends. Skarsgård, on the other hand, he was just scary all the time. It's like, but that's just my personal preference. Other than that, some of the kid actors were much better in the newer version. I'll give that part, and I'm interested to see what they do with the adults.
Oh, they got
I'm very excited.
Yeah, so that part I'm kind of excited for, and to see what they do next. So I don't want to completely judge the new one until I see the second part, but I feel like they missed an opportunity filming them back to back or together like Tommy Lee at least did, because in his version he was able to have both adults and kids interact, in both acts, and the kids don't age then. In this version, we're going to know these kids have aged a year when they try to do these flashbacks. So that's going to be an issue.
Well, they're already, I mean, when I saw them at Horror Hound in Indianapolis, and that was like the second coming of the Beatles, that was crazy. They're already going through puberty. They're already through it. The one has a deep voice now, and he's definitely not your young kid anymore. So I don't know if they, supposedly the kids are in it, but just for a short time. So maybe they shot it when they were still looking like.
Oh, that would make sense.
Well, from what I heard, they brought them back. So, I mean, I'm sure it was early in the shoot. Yeah. So they could do it as soon as possible. And they just wrapped, I think it was last month or the month before. I can't remember which now because we reported on it for the second part. But, of course, that doesn't come out until next August or whatever it is. But
I want to give a quick shout out to John Ritter for the original. I mean, I love him, and rest in peace. And so, yeah, I think that if I was going to choose, I would say the original. But there's got to be a couple of people who feel that way out there.
It does have its hands tied, though, because it's on television, so you can't do nearly as much as you could with an R rating.
Exactly.
I don't have anything against. I mean, I loved Harry Anderson, another R.I.P.
Well, and all those guys in that, and I know you were like all the TV. That's the thing; they were the big people at the time. John Ritter not only was fresh off of Three's Company, he had another show at the time, I believe,
with Billy Bob Thornton.
Yeah, and
Hearts on Fire.
Yeah,
and then and Harry Anderson, of course, Night Court was at its peak probably at that time, I believe. And just everybody else in the cast was either in television or movies at the time. Annette O'Toole was huge. I mean, she was like the star. But yeah, I mean, now looking at retrospect, like, who are these people most of the time? But at that time, they were big. That was a big.
And
cast.
I know why they did it. I know why they did the casting. But when I read the book, I had specific images of Richie and the gang, and Bill, and I had specific images. And I guess when I saw the actors portraying them,
right,
they didn't live up to what I had seen in my head.
And I can totally understand that. Because I am one of those who are like, there's a lot of stuff in certain books that I would love to see in a movie, but like I brought up with Jaws, it's like you don't need half the shit that's in that book to be in the movie. You don't need Hooper's affair with Brody's wife. You don't need the mobster story in the background. It's relevant enough that this mayor just wants to keep the beaches open. You don't need all the other bullshit to go along with it. And, it just, you don't need all that. Sometimes you can shake that off. And it has a lot of that in that. It does.
And
as much as you
when you're writing a novel, that's different than a screenplay. It's like, I don't even know if I'm capable of writing a novel, although I'm trying, because I see things cinematically. That's how I write, is like cinematically. So when you go to write a novel, it's a different ballgame because you have to have filler. You have to have exactly what you're talking about, Tom. Now, it's not filler. It's part of the story. But it's filler if you're writing a screenplay.
Exactly.
You have to keep everything visual, where you have the luxury when it's on page, you can wax rhapsodic about an affair between Brody's wife and Hooper. And you can get into that. In the movie, it has no place because we're just interested in Bruce the shark, what he does, and how these people react to it.
Exactly. And that's the thing. A book is a completely different medium because you can get into different people's heads. The narrator can tell you what somebody's feeling and that you can't necessarily project on screen, sometimes. And when it came to a lot of Stephen King's novels, especially when it came to the metaphysical stuff, it was just impossible to show on screen. And that's what Tommy Lee Wallace ran into was, especially in the second film, he said it was like just the special effects that we needed to do were just impossible. So we got this really crappy ending, with this big puppet spider, and and just like he was very disappointed with it, but he's he's not against the new one, but he's interested to see what they're going to do to tackle that. And I think they're setting up Turtle and a lot of things, which I'm really want to give this second half a chance to show me, okay, this is what you were doing. Now it's more like the book than the other version. Because from what we got from the first movie, they played it very safe. It was a very much almost a beat for beat remake of the television version without the adult stuff.
Yeah. I mean, do you guys think that there are just certain books that they just shouldn't make into movies, or do you think that, like...
No, but I'm also one of those who thinks that, like I said, Jaws and Jurassic Park are two of my favorite adaptations, and they're nothing like the books in a lot of ways. So
I feel like in both of those cases that the movies are better than the book. Like,
exactly.
Yeah. I mean,
that's
I think as long as you have something good to add and contribute, and some way to make the movie better than the book, or different enough, or even making it so true to the book that you're doing justice to it. It just depends. I mean,
Psycho's another one where I like the movie much better than the book. The book is kind of boring and meandering in some places, and you don't really like the version of Norman you get in the book than what we got on screen. Because he's a schlubby kind of weird guy in the book. At least you're more on his page and more him in the version in the movie than you are. I mean, you'll have these examples, and some people will probably argue with me, and that's fine. And we can move on from this question too. But yeah, unless anybody else has anything to add to it, but definitely.
I was just going to say that, in terms of adaptations of one of King's books, and I don't know if anybody would tackle it or would even want to, I still say somebody needs to grab Do McKee, because that has your supernatural elements with all of the King's relational, things that he does so well, and that is ripe for some sort of cinematic treatment.
Yeah.
Well, he's open for a comeback with this It thing, but from what we've been reporting here, it sounds like they're going to fuck it up, and it's not Stephen King's fault; it's Hollywood's.
Oh yeah,
like turning Cujo into a robot and all this other crap. It's like, first of all, don't even touch the ones that were great the first time out. They were fine then. You didn't need all the special effects for Pet Sematary. You didn't need all the special effects for Cujo. You didn't need all the special effects to do that. Do the stuff that you needed the special effects for, like It. Great example, but they kind of played it safe, like I said, but we'll see here. Same thing with, like, if you're going to do The Stand, The Dark Tower, another one they screwed up.
Oh, I was so mad about that.
It's like, come on, you have everything you can do now to do this story and even set up a franchise, and what do?
Well, because we're picking the hottest people at the time that may not have necessarily been good for the roles. I mean, when you envision Randall Flagg, do we see Matthew McConaughey? All right. No. No, we don't.
No, and look at the ones we've gotten so far. We've gotten Carrie 2 times now.
Stop.
Yeah.
Another one that doesn't need to keep being remade.
Yeah.
Christine, I think, is rumored again to be remade.
Oh, for fuck's sake, no.
It's like, stay away from these ones that didn't need.
Yeah.
Langoliers, go do that.
Yeah, remake that or Golden Years. Remake the bad ones.
Yeah. Something needs to be kind of revisited,
I heard that they're making a movie of Rose Madder, but I'm not sure.
Really?
Yeah. But
I think they turned it into a miniseries.
I was going to say, wasn't that a miniseries?
I thought it was.
I thought so. That's the thing. Most of them already have been done in one shape, form, or another. And that's the other thing in this streaming world. This is the perfect time. It should have been like a 10-part miniseries. It should have. I mean, this is the thing. This is the guy. If you're going to do these miniseries like this, grab his books.
Yeah. They should have done that with The Dark Tower 110.
Well, and that was what Amazon's plan, I think, was. But then now that the movie flopped, I don't know if Susan knows anything more about that.
Yeah, no, it's kind of dead in the water right now, because the movie, just like you said, did not do well at all. It was very polarizing, and it's not what people expected. And Hollywood, I know why they do it. I keep saying it because I have this love-hate relationship with Hollywood, but I know why they do the things they do, but then I want to punch them in the face.
Oh yeah.
Because they always want to cast the hottest people to get the butts in the seats of the theater, which I get, but they're not necessarily the right people for the job.
That's why something like Get Out was so good, because like, well, not what's her name, the girl, but the main actor was not in that much stuff before, and you know, it was more believable because you felt like you were experiencing it through an ordinary person and not through like, I don't know, like Kevin Hart or some other, ridiculous person that they could have cast in that role.
Or
So-
Jamie
Well, it's a good example. Most either actors like Jamie Lee Curtis or even actors like Robert Englund who take on Freddy, they were nobodies when they started in horror film and then they became somebody.
Yeah.
You know, or like Robert Englund, they're always associated with the role, but yeah.
Well, and England doesn't really shy away from that, though.
No, he's embraced it.
Like Leonard Nimoy was with "I'm Not Spock." I mean, he doesn't. He's recognizes he was Freddy. You know?
Yeah, and he wears it proud, and I'm glad, and I hope to see him do it some more. I know you're not as on board with that, Susan, but not to bring out
No, I'm fine with it with Robert Englund. It's just the other guy that makes me mental.
It would have to be like the best script ever in order for me to feel. I mean, I just don't know what they could do at this point with it.
Well, there's plenty they could do with Nightmare on Elm Street is so wide open. See, that's the thing. It's never really been tapped to its full potential.
I'd love to see Harrison Smith's come to fruition, and that's not because we had him as a guest.
Right.
But I think he has a great sensibility. He loves horror. He's got the connections. I mean, it's like, come on, Jason Blum, give him a shot. Then you can say you made somebody else a king.
Yeah. Well, and that's just it. It's like, I think that it's out there. It may happen. I wouldn't bet against it anyway. Here's a quick one we can answer. Steven, Jesus, I'm sorry, Stephanie. Stephanie Littlepage asks, I seem to recall hearing they're going to be a movie sequel to The Shining based on the book Dr. Sleep. Yes, there is. I believe Ewan McGregor was attached to that, if they haven't been filming already.
Bruce Greenwood.
What's that? And Bruce Greenwood?
Yeah, and Bruce Greenwood's signed on.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that's coming. I think they're already filming that. So yeah. Captain April asked a good question, but it's not horror related.
What did they ask?
Which version of True Grit? I love them both.
Yeah, I can't answer that one.
This is hard because I liked what John Wayne did originally. And I like what Jeff Bridges did and what the Coen brothers did. So I'm looking at them as two separate films. I know it's the same subject matter, but Jeff really tried to stay away from John Wayne's portrayal.
I think that was smart.
Yeah.
Well, not only that, from what I've never read the novel, but from what I know between the differences between the two and what I know of, that's a good example of the John Wayne version went and took all the stuff you didn't really need that was excess in the novel or couldn't be explored at that time and did a really good job with it. And then the Coen brothers kind of stuck a little bit closer to the novel, which now is more doable today. And not just because of the special effects, but more so just the speak and get more accurate as far as Westerns, because back then they all had to be kind of color coded with, you couldn't really show how it was back then. But yeah, I mean, it's not a horror question, but that's a good example of one of those where they did it right with the remake, because it was more of a readaptation of, it did have elements of the original film, so it could classify it as a remake, but at the same time they did delve into some things in the novel that weren't in the other ones. So
I just wanted to quickly say to everybody that the Coen brothers' new film, The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, is awesome. So when it comes on Netflix, you just watch it. Trust me, it's amazing.
It's got a good cast. Definitely.
It's a really good cast. And it's like an anthology thing. It's really cool.
Yeah, and I had a question here earlier. I'm trying to find it again about are we familiar with or what our favorite Christmas horror movies are? I know it's a little earlier to get into that. The only ones that come to, I was gonna say Gremlins, of course,
Gremlins.
because it's like one of my favorite movies of all time. But the other ones I think of is, of course, Silent Night, Deadly Night.
Black Christmas.
Black Christmas is a classic. And then I remember some Santa Sleigh from a year back, and I seen the Krampus one. That wasn't too bad. That was very reminiscent of Gremlins, though.
Yeah, I was pretty fond of Krampus as well.
I love everybody that was in that movie, so it was just a win.
Is Love Actually a horror movie?
In some places, yes.
Yes, yes, it is. It's where Andrew Lincoln started his horror career.
They should do a horror version of The Grinch. I'm so sick of these other versions. It's
Oh
like,
my god, yeah.
Benedict Cumberbatch. Why?
Jim Carrey was bad enough. I mean, I love Jim Carrey, but
I don't.
the original with Boris Karloff was just perfect. I don't know.
Yeah, they shouldn't.
Kurt Russell, Tekka and Bald brings this out. Kurt Russell's going to be Santa, and that does look like a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's a family movie. I have no problems. There's tons of family movies I could get into for Christmas, but there's only so many horror ones that are really good. I mean, every once in a while you'll have a franchise that'll do a one on Christmas time, but because I think the Demonic Toys versus Puppet Master was a Christmas one, and one of the wasn't one of the Amityville ones took place on Christmas, or am I mixing that up with another movie? Maybe I'm mixing that up with Black Christmas. I can't remember. I know they remade that too. So
that was awful. Something I wanted to say, since someone asked the Christmas question, I wish that Thanksgiving, the trailer that Eli Roth did in Death Proof, I wish, and Planet Terror, I wish that was a real movie. Do that, Eli Roth. If somebody tell Eli Roth to do that.
Well, if Machete was a bigger hit than it was, they probably would have made more of those, I think.
Yeah,
I mean, that was a hit, but the sequel didn't do that well. And I know they had talked about a few of those becoming movies, but didn't one of the other ones get made? But it was like, maybe I'm wrong.
Hobo with a Shotgun was part of Grindhouse. The trailers, and
it could be what I'm thinking of.
That one, I love Rutger Hauer. That was like one of those train wrecks that you can't help but watch. It's terrible, but it's terrible in a good way. If you get the chance, watch that. It's B movie right up there.
Oh my god! And also going back to Rob Zombie, like his trailer in there, I would watch that movie like all day. That looks so silly. It's like She-Wolves of the SS or whatever with Nicolas Cage.
Yeah. That was the one I was almost thinking. Didn't they make that one somewheres or something like that? But I was wrong.
I mean, if they did, please send me.
Maybe it was in my mind.
Yeah. But that Nicolas Cage's Fu Manchu thing, I can.
Well, it's coming probably. What hasn't Nick done lately?
Nick will do anything you give him a nickel for.
Well, he sort of has to. He's broke.
I gotta pay my taxes.
Yeah, and my homes that are foreclosed on, and my Ferraris.
I don't want to go to jail.
That's a perfect Nick Cage.
Oh my god! Did you know that his son's name is Kal-El?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You know, he was going to be in Superman Reborn. That was his.
Superman Lives or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
Superman Lives. Yeah. Wow.
I'd love to see an animated version of that just to see how much of a train wreck it would have been. Because it was ready to start filming. It was like days before shooting, and they shut it down.
You know, people give Nicolas Cage shit, but I like him.
I
really
him.
do. He takes chances. Now, not all the chances pay off, but he takes chances. I mean, he's kind of like Michael Caine and Gene Hackman back in the 70s and 80s, where we never saw a movie we didn't like. You know, and I will give him that. And now he's embracing the horror genre, and I think that's terrific. You know, he's trying to reinvent himself. You know?
Yeah. This isn't a horror thing either, but if anyone hasn't seen this movie that's listening, Werner Herzog's Bad Lieutenant Protocol New Orleans is one of Nicolas Cage's most wild performances I've ever seen.
Oh my God, the first one, I had nightmares. I'm like, Harvey Keitel, I didn't need to see your junk.
Yeah.
Now I'm scarred. Great.
But both of those movies are like, they're crazy and like a little kind of like, what? But
what's worse is like Cinemax at the time that came out used to have that scene in one of their fucking trailers for the channel when they would advertise a bunch of stuff at once, so it was on all the time. So, you know, you see him naked standing there.
Oh my God, why? Don't show me your junk. Thanks.
Keep showing it over and over. It's like, oh God.
But the sequel,
God damn it.
the sequel, like how we were talking about sequels, like Port of Call New Orleans, it has essentially nothing to do with the first movie at all, and it's also directed by Werner Herzog, which is like, it was such a like, what the fuck is this kind of movie?
Well,
but it was
used to working with Klaus Kinski. Werner. So that's probably why you get that. Where Abel Ferrara, who did Colt 45 or Miss 45,
Miss 45,
Miss 45, did a lot of the grindhouse and exploitation. So that's probably why you got that different feel.
Yeah,
because Werner did Fitzcarraldo, I believe. So so that's definitely different styles of filmmaking.
and but both of them are like, they kind of like borderline on horror in a way, both of those movies, at least psychologically. And I think if y'all haven't seen either of them, they're definitely good movies to visit. I mean, but just be warned about Harvey Keitel's genitalia. And only
that Bad Lieutenant thing, I think that was more to do just because the company owned the name, wasn't it? And they were just trying to promote it as a sequel, and I don't even think it had anything to do with the other film at all.
Yeah, what they're doing with Penny Dreadful. They're just using it to draw people in, and then it's like, well, by the way, this is neo-noir with a touch of the supernatural, and you're like, what?
It sounds sort of like an American Gods ripoff in a way.
Yeah. It sounds very much like Fred Ward and David Warner's Cast a Deadly Spell.
Oh, yeah. Yes. That's true.
Yeah. Like Captain April says, I'm going to try and do my best, Harvey Keitel. Susan, it was a bit cold on the set that day.
Oh, God, no. And I love Harvey, but it's like, Jesus, man. And that scene with the girls in the car, wow. That plays in my nightmares. I'm like, yeah, Lori, that is hard.
Don't judge.
Oh my God. For those of you in the chat that haven't seen Bad Lieutenant, you have to see it now because you have to see that one scene.
I'm sure that shit's on YouTube. At least that scene. And
oh, it is. Yeah, it is. I know. I took a stroll to see that for whatever reason.
Is that one of those weird things where even though it scarred you, you just had to see it again to go through like a therapeutic thing or what? I'm hoping.
I was drunk the first time. Oh God, it did happen, damn it. How that went.
Oh Lord.
I'm like, here I'm watching it again. Why? Yeah. Oh Lord. Harvey Keitel. Great actor.
That was good. I don't know if we can top that. I don't know. Oh balls. So now, was there any other good questions?
Do another Leprechaun.
They are.
No.
But they are.
Sci-fi, March.
A
completely different actor.
He's going to be in it.
No, I don't think so. I have no idea what this was going to be, but this is the beginning of sci-fi trying to scoop up all these. We just brought this up in a recent report. Susan can probably elaborate with Critters and Killer Clowns from Outer Space. In March, they're debuting a reboot-quel to Leprechaun with a completely different actor. Warwick Davis is not in it. But it's taking it back to the old timeline. Not that anybody watched the remake. I'm sure nobody here besides
I did. It was horrifyingly stupid.
They are getting another one.
Yeah. DJ Odyssey, we were going to get more Tremors in the form of a sci-fi series, that they were very interested in, and they did take it. They took the pilot, and then they pulled the rug out from under Kevin Bacon. So that isn't going to happen anytime soon unless Bacon and company shop it around.
Oh, that sucks, because that would be really cool.
Yeah, but
yeah, that one was supposed to kind of ignore the straight-to-video sequels and be a straight sequel to the original.
Oh, nice.
With Kevin Bacon's character. So it'd be kind of like a alternate universe, I guess. But I think they even had talked about bringing other cast members back in here and there and stuff like that, too. Oh, that would have been amazing.
Doing anything, why don't you grab him, too?
He was just making another Tremors movie, that's all. So. That actually got to see the light of day. I have it. It's still sitting in plastic. I looked at it, and I'm like, I don't know if I liked the other 5, but
yeah.
Tremors and Ice.
That's a beloved series. I mean, that's a beloved series of films. And Kevin Bacon
it even had a TV series on Sci-Fi for a while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And he pitched it again. So yeah, and they didn't take it. So he's kind of very disappointed about that.
I find that really hard to believe since he was behind it. That's crazy.
Right. It feels like there's got to be some other issue behind it, because that's like a no-brainer.
Well, it's the Sci-Fi Channel. I mean, the Sci-Fi Channel's like, let me get some good programming in there. No, I've lost.
I didn't want to pay for it.
Yeah.
And that's a shame.
Like Return of Sharknado or something like that.
Well, when Sci-Fi started, and now they're Siffy. I call them Siffy. When Sci-Fi started, it was great. I mean, you saw things like Man with the Screaming Brain, Alien Apocalypse, all the shit that should be on the Sci-Fi.
Well, they reran Twilight Zone. I think they even did Tales from the Dark Side. They did Star Wars movies, all that kind of stuff. I'm sure they looked at the bill for this and they're like, holy shit, we can make 6 Sharknado movies for this. Fuck that.
Yeah. God.
They just have like Ian Ziering like hanging out in a room there.
What else is he doing? He's doing bad cooking.
He's on salary. He's just
Ian. It's Ian.
No, he actually goes by Ian.
Yeah, he does.
I thought it was Ian all these years too. What the fuck kind of name is Ian?
I heard that and I was like, shut the hell up.
Ian.
It sounds like when he was a kid, he didn't want to deal with the actual way of saying it.
Yeah, maybe. Or like maybe his agent was like, you can distinguish yourself by being Ian.
That was after they did a bump.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For you.
Yep. Yeah, we all miss the early days of Sci-Fi.
Yeah, back when they had like Mystery Science Theater, new episodes when they were still good.
Farscape.
Oh God, I totally forgot about fucking MSTK3 or MSTK3K. I can't even talk tonight. I quit.
Yeah, but that, like I said, we're probably in a lull. I mean, I'm sure I'll find some interesting tidbits of stories that are out there, but as for actual, legitimate things that are, oh my God, we have to talk about it, I don't know how, if we're going to have any of those. But I'm sure
maybe we'll get some special guests. Maybe we'll try and do that in the lull. We'll see what we can come up with.
Yeah. Because I guess, we're kind of over Halloween now. That's kind of, died down the talk about that. So I'm sure there's going to be something coming up, like some reboot, remake, that I'm going to be banging my head against my keyboard going, why are we doing this?
Well, hopefully we can find some good things to talk about. I know, it's usually negative stuff. So hopefully it's some good stuff. And if not, maybe we can get some good guests that you guys can interact with and get some questions out too. So we'll see what we can work on for you.
If the Chiodo brothers are out there, we'd love to have you on.
Indeed, we would.
They don't listen to us.
Podcast, if you want to be on the show, we'll bring you on. So.
Yeah, we'll have to get our talent.
I'm sure we can find something. But no, I've actually been kind of putting some feelers out there, hoping to hear back from some people. So you never know. Other than that, I think that about wraps it up. unless there was any other good questions you guys saw that we missed.
No, I didn't.
But I know we're running on like 2 hours here, so we probably want to kind of cut her short, because then people complain that we're so long when they have to rewatch them.
Yeah.
So,
just think of us that movie to the TV series that ended abruptly.
But we'll be back.
Yeah, we'll be back. Yeah.
There's next week.
Yeah,
and like I said, even if we don't have something to talk about, we'll find a guest, or maybe we'll talk about some of our favorite horror movies, or just take questions from you guys. We'll see what we can come up with. And I'm sure Susan will have a guest for us. If not, one of the writers will join us. So we'll definitely have something to talk about, I'm sure. So Lori, since you're our guest tonight, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? I know you did a little earlier, but like where people can find you and what you do for 1428, all that good stuff.
Well, I have been so busy because I sort of set myself up with too many jobs. But for 1428 Elm, at the moment, I am doing weekly recaps of American Horror Story, which this season is insane. If you haven't seen it, go watch it on demand. Or FX also now has their own streaming service, like going back to all that stuff. And then I am going back to this column that I originally started called Horror Through the Decades, where I started with the 50s. And so I'm going to do like 5 movies from the 50s, 6 from the 60s, 7 from the 70s, 8 from the 80s, so on and so forth, where I just pick like different movies from that era that I appreciate and do like a piece on them. And I also do just reviews of the movies that come my way. I get a lot of screeners and stuff like that. But working with Susan is great. And you can always find me on Twitter. It's at the Kikta, THEKIKTA. And I'm on Instagram as Lori Kikta, LORRYKIKTA. And you can find me on 1428 Elm and a bunch of other websites.
Awesome.
Lori, where do you want me to send that check to you?
Who's getting? Why didn't I get a check? No, Mecca, why don't you tell them where they can find you real quick?
I am Mecha Random 42 on YouTube, Random Game User 42 on Patreon, Random Monkey MNKY on Twitter. I think there's links in the description of the video below, and you can always just click my name in the chat, and that's how you can find me here. Yeah, and I talk about a lot of pop culture stuff over on my YouTube channel, and I'm a ranter.
And you pop up most of the time on the After Dark podcast as well.
Yep.
Susan, where can they find you as well as 1428 Elm Street? Or
Well,
1428 Elm. I did it again.
You can find me at Nerdrotic every Friday night for Friday Night Tights. You can find me there on the Nerdrotic channel. You can also find me on Twitter at Susan on the Ledge. You can follow 1428 Elm on Facebook and also on Twitter at 1428 Elm, and the same for Instagram. You can get me on Facebook, and you can also find me on Instagram at De Facto Scribe. And that's where it's at for me.
All right. And of course, you can find me here and the main channel and all those. To get your Facebook link added to that too. So for the 1428 one, I'll have to get that one down there. So yeah, make sure you guys check us all out. Click the subscribe, follow buttons, whatever, what have you. Click the like button on this. Share the show. We want to get this show out there. We want people to know we're out here, because horror doesn't have like the reach that some of the other programs do, but we want people to know what we're up to, so then that way maybe we can get some bigger names to pop on here, and you guys can actually get a chance to ask the questions you want to know from the big boys and girls. So definitely share the show so it's people listen and know we're out there. Yeah. Other than that, I just want to thank everybody for joining us once again, as always, and Susan and Mecca and Lori for joining us here on the show. And I want to thank you guys and have a good one.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.